What if I told you that the power to command a room, to make others comply without force or begging, has less to do with what you say and everything to do with what you are? Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, and yet most of us still miss the point. We think power is about dominance or charisma or wealth. But Machiavelli knew better. He saw that aura, the invisible force that makes people obey you, is built not on manipulation alone, but on mastery of perception, inner clarity, and ruthless self-awareness. And here's the twist. It's not about faking anything. It's about becoming someone who cannot be ignored. Someone so internally aligned, so psychologically sharp, that others instinctively follow not out of fear, but because they sense something deeper. Something almost mythic. We've all felt it. That moment when someone enters a room and suddenly the energy shifts. People quiet down slightly. They look, they notice, and they wait. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's an engineered presence, a cultivated aura. And Machiavelli, in The Prince, hinted at the mechanics of it. He didn't just write about politics, he wrote about perception, about how people think, how they fear, how they project. He understood that most people live in reaction, not intention. And if you can master how others perceive you while knowing precisely who you are, you become magnetic. But here's the paradox: the more you chase being liked, the less power you have. The more you stand in truth, even when it's uncomfortable, the more people begin to obey, not because they have to, but because they want to.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think of this: what if people's obedience isn't about your authority, but about their belief in your authority? Machiavelli would argue that power is not just what you hold, but what others believe you hold. And belief is sculpted through subtle cues: how you handle pressure, how you speak when everyone else stays silent, how you carry yourself when the outcome is uncertain. Your aura begins with self-possession. If you don't trust your own words, why should anyone else? If you don't believe you're worthy of being followed, why would anyone choose to follow you? This is where most people fail. They try to act powerful without becoming powerful. And that disconnect is obvious. People can sense it. They may not know why they don't respect you, but they feel the gap. And so they pull away. You must become the kind of person who radiates inevitability. That's what Machiavelli really meant when he said it's better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. He wasn't promoting cruelty, he was promoting clarity. A man who is feared properly, wisely, is a man whose decisions are understood to be final. But fear, in the Machiavellian sense, isn't terror. It's certainty. It's the absence of ambiguity. It's the knowledge that this man means what he says, that he knows what he's doing, and that he will go all the way. That kind of presence doesn't require yelling. It doesn't require threats. It requires alignment, internal coherence, a refusal to flinch when the world leans in. You want people to obey you? Start by obeying yourself, unapologetically. Let me challenge you here. How often do you say things you don't fully believe, just to avoid discomfort? How often do you shrink your truth to stay likable? Every time you do that, you fracture your aura. You dilute the signal. You become noise. Machiavelli would say, "It is not titles that honor men, but men who honor titles." In other words, it's not your role that grants you power, it's the way you embody it. People don't obey a man just because he has status. They obey because that status feels earned. It resonates. It feels aligned. And the funny thing, most of the time, people don't even realize why they obey. It's not always logic. It's not even fear. It's something deeper, something primal. A recognition of authority that transcends position. It's spiritual. It's archetypal. It's the aura. But let's not pretend this is easy. Building that kind of presence takes sacrifice. You'll lose people. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be accused of arrogance or coldness. Why? Because most people are uncomfortable around clarity. Because clarity makes excuses die. When you walk into a room knowing who you are, you become a mirror that exposes who others are not. And some people will hate you for it. That's the price. But what you gain in return is influence. Real influence. The kind that can't be bought or faked. The kind that changes rooms, changes minds, and eventually changes history. So the question becomes, are you willing to be disliked in order to be obeyed? Are you willing to be clear, even if it costs you comfort? Because the aura Machiavelli described isn't for the faint-hearted. It's for men who would rather be alone in truth than surrounded in pretense. And here's the final truth of this first chapter. The aura that creates obedience isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself. People follow men who are already going somewhere. And Machiavelli knew that if a man could develop such internal certainty, such psychological depth, that his presence alone could make others pause, then he would never need to beg for power. Because power would flow to him. That's the secret. Not domination, not aggression, but alignment, clarity, and inevitability. Become inevitable and obedience will follow. The art of perception, how to craft a presence that commands obedience without saying a word. If power begins with inner clarity, it is perceived power that gives it form in the world. Machiavelli understood that humans are not rational creatures, we are symbolic ones. We don't just respond to what is real, we respond to what appears real. Your aura, then, is not merely your energy, it is the story others unconsciously tell themselves when they see you. And that story is crafted through 1,000 silent cues: how you dress, how you enter a room, how you pause before speaking. It's not about arrogance. It's about intentionality. Because perception is the battlefield where aura is either crowned or crushed. And if you don't control your image, someone else will guaranteed. You have to understand people are always scanning for hierarchy. It's ancient. It's biological. We size each other up in milliseconds. So the question is not, do people judge me? The question is, what are they concluding before I even open my mouth? Machiavelli would argue that the truly powerful man doesn't wait to be understood, he engineers the understanding. He doesn't just tell people who he is, he shows it without needing to speak. This is where most people go wrong. They over-explain, they justify, they try to be liked, to be accepted, to be seen as nice. But niceness doesn't create obedience. Gravity does. Stillness does. Precision does. When you walk into a room with calm, grounded certainty, people feel it. They may not know why, but they instinctively defer. Because what they feel is order, and order commands respect. Think of it like this: you are a character in a myth, whether you realize it or not. People are projecting onto you constantly. They want to know, are you the hero? The threat? The protector? The fool? and your behavior writes that script for them. So what story are you inviting others to believe about you without realizing it? Are you telegraphing insecurity or poise? Are you broadcasting neediness or direction? Are you asking for permission or carving a path? Machiavelli's genius was in knowing that appearances are not lies, they are tools. You can wear power like armor, not to deceive, but to remind. To remind yourself of who you've chosen to become, and to remind others that they are in the presence of someone who chooses. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately lowered your energy to make others more comfortable? That's not humility, it's self-erasure. And it destroys your aura. Machiavelli would call this a failure of virtue, a term he used to describe the active, masculine force of will, vision, and effectiveness. Virtue is not about being morally good. It's about being potent, being capable, being seen. And when you suppress your energy to fit in, you are signaling to the tribe that you are not a leader, but a follower. That you will conform, bend, dilute. And that is exactly why people don't obey you, because they sense you are still waiting for permission to be powerful. Now let's get practical. If you want to command obedience without saying a word, you must master 3 silent languages: posture, presence, and pacing. Posture is not physical alone, it is psychological. Do you occupy your space or do you shrink in it? Presence is your ability to be here fully, not distracted, not scattered, but rooted. And pacing is the rhythm of your energy. Do you rush to fill silence? Or do you own the silence, letting others lean in? These are not tricks. They are reflections of your internal state. The more secure you are, the less you need to perform. And ironically, the less you perform, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because nothing is louder than stillness. But here's the twist: Machiavelli didn't believe in static power. He understood that power is situational. What works in one setting can backfire in another. So the man who truly commands obedience must also be a master of context. He must be able to shift subtly, strategically, without ever losing his center. That's the dance of perception. You must be adaptive, not reactive. You must sense the room and decide, do I lead with warmth or with gravity? Do I speak now or wait? Do I confront or redirect? This is not manipulation, it is artistry. And those who master it don't just walk through life, they shape life. Because they're not reacting to circumstances. They're orchestrating them. Let me leave you with this question. What would it take for you to walk into every room as if you belonged there, even if no one invited you? Not with arrogance, but with awareness. Not to dominate, but to disturb the hierarchy just enough to be noticed. Because once you do that, you're no longer playing by the tribe's rules. You're writing your own myth. And people will obey not because you force them to, but because they now believe you are the axis around which movement occurs. That's aura. That's power. And that's the Machiavellian secret most people never understand. The final rule: why true power is the ability to walk away and mean it. Let's talk about the final key to Machiavelli's aura, the one so few people ever master, yet the one that separates the truly powerful from the merely impressive. It's not charm. It's not confidence. It's not dominance. It's the ability to walk away, not as a tactic, not as a bluff, but as a principle. Machiavelli understood something that most people today still miss. The man who cannot walk away is the man who has no leverage. And the man with no leverage has no power, only performance. Your aura collapses the moment you become emotionally or psychologically dependent on anything you cannot control. A follower, a lover, a paycheck, a reputation. If your identity is tethered to something outside of you, then obedience from others will always come with a silent leash around your own neck. This is the paradox of power. The more you need others, the less they obey. Because people can feel when your self-worth is up for negotiation. They may not consciously know it, but they sense it in your tone, your hesitation, your craving to be liked. And what Machiavelli teaches us brutally, but clearly, is that the man who has the strongest aura is the one who could lose everything and still remain whole. He's not reckless. He's not careless. He simply does not beg. He does not cling. He does not compromise his essence to preserve an image. And that creates something rare and magnetic, psychological detachment. People obey you not just because of what you say, but because they know you don't need them to. Let me ask you something that most people are too afraid to face. What are you afraid to lose? And more importantly, what version of yourself are you betraying to keep it? That fear, that avoidance, is the exact point where your aura leaks. It's the crack in your armor, the place where you bend instead of stand. And here's where Machiavelli gets misread. He wasn't advocating for cruelty or sociopathy. He was teaching sovereignty. He was showing us that unless you are willing to walk away, you will be owned by what you fear. And once fear owns you, others will too. In love, in politics, in business, in leadership. Because obedience flows most naturally to the man who is unattached to obedience itself. He is free, and freedom is the most terrifying, awe-inspiring force anyone can encounter. The question becomes, how do you cultivate that kind of detachment without becoming cold or numb? The answer lies in purpose. When your life is anchored in something deeper than approval, deeper than success, deeper even than survival, then your aura becomes untouchable. Because you are not playing the same game as everyone else. You see beyond the social currency. You understand that the point is not to win every interaction, but to remain aligned in every moment. You are not here to be chosen, you are here to be true. And truth has gravity. It doesn't chase. It doesn't convince. It doesn't explain itself. It simply is. And when you embody that, people don't just obey, they organize themselves around you. Now let me make this even more practical. The most powerful phrase a man can master is this: I don't need this. Not as a threat, but as a truth. It's the silent subtext of every powerful presence. You don't need the deal. You don't need the approval. You don't need to be liked. You are here because you choose to be, not because you must. And that subtle shift changes everything. It changes how you walk. It changes how you speak. It changes how others feel when they're around you. Because they sense there's something in you they can't control. And in a world addicted to control, that's both terrifying and irresistible. That's aura. That's command. That's the Machiavellian principle most people never apply. Don't just have options, become the option. And here's the final, most dangerous truth of all. People obey not because they are forced to, but because they want to believe in something stronger than themselves. And when you become that, when you embody clarity, detachment, and purpose, you stop needing to dominate. You don't instruct obedience, you inspire it. You don't manipulate behavior. You reshape belief. You become a living standard, a point of reference, a myth in motion. Not because you chased power, but because you became someone for whom power was no longer the goal, it was just the byproduct of self-mastery. So I'll leave you with one final question, one that only you can answer. What version of yourself would emerge if you stopped needing anything from anyone? What would your voice sound like? What would your posture be? What rooms would you walk into or walk out of without hesitation? Because the truth is, the aura Machiavelli spoke of isn't reserved for kings or tyrants. It's available to any man who dares to become complete within himself. And once that happens, obedience isn't something you demand, it's something that happens.